So let's get the meeting started. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and Patty, could you please call the roll?
Chair Saltzman.
Here.
Director Saylor.
Here.
Director Allard.
Here.
Director Allen. Director Duffy.
Here.
Director Frerichs. Director Holmes. Director Howell. Director Lee. Director Lee. Okay. Thanks. Director McPartland.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director O'Neill. Director Peralez. Director Price. Director Rayburn.
Here.
Director Sparing. Director Rowlett.
This is Director O'Neill. I couldn't get myself unmuted.
Thank you. You're noted as being present.
Thank you.
Director Rowlett.
Roulette is here.
Thank you. And Director Frerichs is in the waiting room, so we'll admit him. And we certainly have a quorum.
There he is. Lucas.
Great. So when we can get the flag up on our screens, I will ask Director McPartland to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'd be honored. Thank you.
Are we going to have a flag? And if not, we can all just look at Director Rayburn's box because he has his virtual background that has the flag.
That'll work.
Okay, let's do that.
All right. Very good. Here we have. All right. How about if everybody continues to sit? Seeing as how it's, I normally salute, and it's also legitimate to salute in the sitting position. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we'll now go to item 3, which is the report of the chair. I first want to welcome you all to our first virtual board meeting for the Capitol Corridor Joint Powers Authority Board of Directors. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N2529, which temporarily modifies Brown Act requirements. As this is a virtual meeting, all speakers, including CCJPA board and staff, are requested to announce their name as they begin to speak. This meeting is being live streamed and can be watched via capitolcorridor.org/ccjpa-board. And you can also download the presentation materials at that same link. To board and staff, please mute your microphones whenever you are not speaking to avoid background noise. And for public participants, your microphones are automatically muted. If you want to speak on an agenda item, please dial *9 to virtually raise your hand when public comment is announced. If you wish to make a general public comment on a subject not on the agenda, you will be given an opportunity to speak under item 7. However, if you have a comment on an item which is on the agenda, we'll take those comments after the staff presentation and prior to board discussion. Comments which have been received via email have been provided to the board and will be included as a permanent part of the meeting record. Board members, in order to reduce confusion throughout the meeting when it is time for director's remarks, I will call for the comments, and if you'd like to speak, you can virtually raise your hand. If you are participating on Zoom video, You can click on the raise hand in the bottom right area of the participants list. And if you are participating in the meeting via phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. Also, if you can't find or get to one of those features, if you're on video, you can also just raise your hand, and I will try to keep track of people that way as well, since most of us are on video today. Vice Chair Saylor and I will speak last during those comment periods. In the interest of time and to provide an opportunity for equal participation, please try to keep your comments concise, as I know we are always actually very good about doing at this board. So today we'll be hearing a bunch of items, but I think the highlights are we're going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on Capital Corridor service and ridership. We're happy to see that there's been a recent increase in service and some growing ridership, but it has still been a challenging several months. This is our first meeting since this pandemic started in the United States. So we have a lot to talk about here. So we're going to leave plenty of time for questions and discussions on that item and the budget, and hopefully can move through some of the other items more quickly. We're also going to hear a proposal to submit an application for federal funding to support the Santa Clara siding construction under the CRISI program. And finally, I've been talking to Capital Corridor staff over the past few days, and I'm planning to work with our managing director, Rob Paget, to draft a statement from Capital Corridor to take a stance, to take a public stand against racism, and to talk about what we're doing to promote diversity, not just within Capital Corridor, but Capital Corridor is seeking to be a leader within the larger rail industry. So we're going to work on this statement. We couldn't do it in time to get it on the agenda to have us vote on it, but we're going to work on putting together this statement. And then I've also asked staff to come back at the next board meeting to brief us on how they are actually working on this, and not that we're not just putting out a statement, that we're talking about what we're actually doing. So there'll be an informational update at the next meeting. So this completes my report, and we can now move into the rest of the agenda. The next item is the consent calendar. So first, do we have any public comments on the consent calendar?
I don't see any public comments.
Thank you. And then do we have a motion on the
Chair
consent calendar?
Salzman, I move approval of the minutes of the tremendous project at Sacramento and the second amendment to the fiscal year 20 budget.
Great, and I think I saw Director Freyricks raise his hand. I don't know if he wanted a second. You are muted, Director Freyricks, so if you can unmute. Does he need to be unmuted by staff? Patty, if you could go ahead and do that. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was just going to second it, and I was muted, so and I wasn't able to unmute.
Great. So we have a motion and a second. If there's no conversation on that, then we will go to the vote.
Chair Saltzman,
Yes.
Director Saylor,
Yes.
Director Allard,
Yes.
Director Duffy. Got it. Director Ferris. Got it. Director Holmes, I don't see him here yet. Director Lee. Thank you. Director McPartland.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Aye.
Director O'Neill.
Aye.
Thank you. Wallace. Maybe on the second screen.
Is it roulette?
Thank you. Yeah. Director Rayburn.
Yes.
Director Sparing. Okay, got it. And Director Roulette.
Aye.
Thank you. Carried unanimously.
Thanks. So we will move on to our action and discussion items. The first item is the COVID-19 update. So I will turn it over to Rob and the staff.
All right, and we should have some slides coming up here shortly. Patty, are those coming up?
Yep, just a minute.
All right, thank you. So in our present, and thanks to everybody for coming. If you like my background, for those who are listening today, these are all available on our website, and so we'd love to have you show those on your Zoom calls. In our presentation today, I will first have my Deputy Managing Director, Leo Sanchez, go through ridership and service impacts of the COVID-19 health crisis over the past several months, followed by Priscilla Kalugden, our Communications Officer, who will describe how we've engaged with our customers. And I'll wrap up with a budget implication discussion and an overview of how the Federal CARES Act has supported Capital Corridor. While it is easy to get discouraged by our short-term challenges and the uncertainty we are all facing today, we see many reasons to be optimistic about the future of intercity passenger rail in Northern California. Your team here at Capital Corridor views our challenge as carefully managing our service over the next 1 to 2 years to keep the organization on solid financial footing, provide our customers with essential service, and ensure everyone's safety, both our customers and our crews. The recently introduced federal transportation bill suggests an unprecedented vision for investment in passenger rail that we think could accelerate many of the opportunities for expansion outlined in our vision plan. We will need to work through the current fiscal challenges, keep our service solid, and stay focused on our long-term opportunities. Before I turn it over to Leo, I would like to make a public statement of appreciation for the employees at Amtrak and Union Pacific that have continued to support the operations of this vital service. We know that most of those who continue to travel during the stay-at-home orders did so to support our communities in healthcare, public safety, logistics, and other essential services. I would also like to thank my team here at Capital Corridor, who quickly adapted to the virtual environment and at the same time changed priorities to focus on critical short-term actions related to health crisis. It is with the support of all those involved in our operation that we've continued to keep our service up and running despite the unprecedented challenges we've all faced. With that, I'll turn it over to Leo. Next slide. You'll need to, and one more. There you go. Thank you.
All right, if we can go. Thanks, Rob. This is Leo Sanchez speaking. All right, so on this first slide that I'm covering actually covers us from the period of March 2nd through June 8th. Just prior to this, to March, in January and February, we're actually looking at levels that exceeded our year-over-year ridership. And then immediately as the COVID-19 pandemic was underway, ridership quickly started to drop off. You can see the timeline of events here, beginning with the Bay Area shelter in place March 16th. We're at 63% year over year. Then ultimately we plateaued down right around April, as low as 4% of our ridership. Now, beginning with the service changes that we made June 1st, we went from 10 trains a day up to 16 trains a day, and you can see that our service ridership has increased to about 11%. So still pretty far low from where we were a year ago, but we can see that the recovery is beginning. Next slide. All right, so this chart here shows us at our lowest ridership week, which was the week of April 6th. And then we're comparing our most recent week that closed out this Sunday, June 14th. And you can see where we were, just taking us through the week from Monday all the way through Sunday. And overall, percent increase has been in the range of 100% to 200% increases from our lowest point. But again, this is still far from where we were a year ago. Next slide. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to start off with talking a little bit about the service modification that we did. So we had train and bus service modifications. So on the train side, we went down from our 30 trains a day down to 10 trains a day. And then we also stopped the service between Sacramento and Auburn. On the bus side, we suspended Route 99, which is our Emeryville to San Francisco connection. Route 21, which is San Jose to Santa Barbara, was suspended. And then we reduced service on Route 20A, which is the Sacramento to Reno, down to 1 round trip. Next slide. All right, so this is a timeline that shows us some of the health and safety precautions that we've taken. So beginning March 21st, when we decreased service, a couple of things that we did, and you can see a few others, but the main ones that I want to highlight are some of the cleaning protocols were enhanced, and then one of the pretty visible things that you'll see on our service is that we installed hand sanitizer dispensers on all of our trains. So that's a feature that you'll continue to see as we continue our service. Then moving beyond that, one of the things that we were able to do with the increased equipment that was out of service is catch up on some of the maintenance that we have. One of the things that I'd like to highlight is the door operators rebuild was completed, and that was one of the leading mechanical delays that we had last year and year prior. So that should help with our mechanical reliability going forward. And then another notable task that we've been able to start is the HVAC and Wi-Fi upgrades are now currently underway. Lastly, June 8th, we continue to have extended train sets, so we have 5-car consist for social distancing on all of our trains that we're running, and then we are retaining the option to cap ridership at 50%, but we're still far from that. 50% would be about roughly 125 passengers per train, and the high point that we've seen is around 70. And we can go on to the next slide, and I'll pass it over to Priscilla.
You probably know you're on mute.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It sounds okay now?
We got you
All
like,
right. For passenger engagement during shelter in place, we developed a variety of ways to connect with our passengers, one of which is we wanted to make sure that we recognized a lot of the essential workers through the Sound the Horn campaign, which was a nationwide effort, participating with other transit agencies. We promoted Earth Day, and we also developed the Capitol Quarter branded backgrounds for video conferencing. Next slide. And as our passengers return to service, obviously, as Leo mentioned, we have a big responsibility to assuage the health and safety concerns for our passengers. Our focus has really been on communicating and installing signage to reflect our improved health and safety standards and practices. And you can see some examples of our signage here. We'll be putting these posters, the ones in the center, on board our trains. And we're also launching a web page where we can continue to update many of our health and safety policies and practices as they evolve over time for our passengers. Next slide.
So the first slide here shows you just an overview of our revenue sources and expenses for FY20. Next slide. Go back a slide. And slide 11 here shows you the impact on our COVID on our operating budget this year in FY20. The center column shows the approved budget for FY20, and I'm going to focus on the right column and walk you through the impacts here. First, to note that the total revenue at present, and this is a period that's projected through the federal fiscal year, so it goes through September 30th, is at $21 million, and that's compared to what we had forecast at $37.5 million for FY20. And I should note that for those of you who've been involved in Capital Corridor for a while, we've been exceeding our revenue forecast for a number of years. So to be below that is unusual for us. We're also, go back a slide, please. We're also expecting to see a slight decline in the overall operating costs of $60 million. And if you look at the bottom right corner, $38.91 million, under our operating agreement with Amtrak, that is what we would be expected to pay for FY20, which is about $10 million more than we had budgeted. And remember that number, I'm going to come back to that as I describe how the CARES Act is benefiting Capital Corridor. Next slide. So the CARES Act provided support to Capital Corridor through the Amtrak budget, and what Congress provided to Amtrak is just over $1 billion in support. $239 million of that was targeted to state-supported services, and that includes intercity passenger rail services in 17 states, and Capital Corridor is one of those 17 states. It also, importantly, limited the charges in FY20 to 80% of what we were billed in FY19. So what does that mean for Capital Corridor? Next slide, please. So the top table here shows you, and you remember that $38.91 million that I described in the previous slide. That is what we would be expected to pay under our operating agreement. Congress capped that charge for FY20 at $19.5 million. So at present, based on our forecast of ridership through the end of the year, we expect the CARES Act to benefit Capital Corridor almost $20 million. It also provides support into 21. So you remember that the state payment that was approved in the current fiscal year was $28.17 million. The CARES Act caps us at $19.5 million. That means we're going to be able to carry over almost $9 million into the next fiscal year to support our operations. And that's going to be important because we certainly see impacts continuing into the next year. And I'll talk about that in the next agenda item. Next slide. Actually, you can go back one. I'm sorry, Patty. You can go back to the last slide of the table. And I'm going to pause there and take questions on this first agenda item.
So we have two people with their hands raised, Mike Barnbaum and Director Roulette.
Sorry, I muted because I have background noise, which you're now going to hear, but I need to still run the meeting. So are you done with your presentation? Because if not, I think you should finish because we do have public comment that I want to go to before directors.
Yeah, the presentation is complete, so we can go to public comment.
Okay, great. I misunderstood you. I thought you were pausing. So let's go to public comment. I see Mike Barnbaum. Do we have anybody else, Patty?
No, he's the only one who's raised his hand.
Great. So if you could unmute him.
Mike, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Capital Corridor directors and staff. This is Mike Barnbaum in Sacramento. I'm watching on my iPad while participating audio on my iPhone. I want to comment about the service restoration plan and have a follow-up question about an amenity on the service. So the services was mentioned in the presentation went to 8 weekday round trips and maintained 5 weekend round trips. Do you know if with the practice of social distancing and the wearing of protective equipment by even passengers, that going to 8 round trips on weekends is that going to be part of the next phase of service restoration? Number one, because as we all remember, normal operating plan called for 11 round trips on the weekend, and we're still only at 5 at the moment. And then will restoration of cafe car service take place if it has not taken place already in the next phase? So those are my questions in the comment section on this item. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I do not see any other public comments. I would like to ask, if I may, that if any directors have joined via telephone, if they could raise their hand so that we can identify them.
And you can raise your hand on the phone by pressing *9.
Right, thank you.
Doesn't look like it, right?
Right, it does not.
Okay. And I did get a text from a director saying that they could hear background noise during the presentation. So if I could remind folks to mute your phones. I know it's a little frustrating with the delay to get you unmuted. But if you're not going to speak right at this moment, then if you could mute your phones, and then we will do our best to get you unmuted as quickly as possible. So any directors have comments or questions? It looks like Director Roulette has his hand up.
And I am not able to unmute him. He may have to take action to unmute himself.
Okay. His hand has gone down, so. Any other directors have comments or questions?
Yes.
Director McPartland? And sorry, if staff could actually, I can't see people raising their hands like this because the presentation is up. So I guess people are going to need to actually use the raise hand feature because I can't see you all. So either if we could take the presentation down, or if, great, so now I can see you. Go ahead, Director McPartland, and then Director Dufty.
All right. It's a work in progress, and it's a learning experience as we end up going through this. The questions I have to do are in relationship to sanitation. And it was said that we have hand sanitizers on every train. Is that going to be on every car?
Yeah, we do have those installed on every car. That's correct.
Amazing. Okay. Along those same lines, how often do you do a complete train or complete car decon?
Hey, this is Leo, and we actually do that on every turnaround, and the how deep the cleaning is depends on where we're at. So we do a cleaning in Sacramento at OMF, which is Oakland, and then down in San Jose. But when we turn around their equipment, it's more of a deep cleaning with shampooing included, and that's every 5 days. So besides that, there's it's kind of a tiered approach.
Okay. Without digging too much into the details, can you simply identify for the deep cleaning is going to be scrubbing? That's deep cleaning. But how about fogging?
You know the answer to that?
I didn't catch that. How about what?
Fogging.
I'll have to get back to you on a response. I know currently some of the focus areas that we're doing are high contact areas like handrails, for example. So those are areas that are cleaned daily.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate your time and the effort, because it's a Herculean task.
Thank you.
I think Devin's raising his hand. Devin, you're muted.
Yay! Good morning, everybody. I just wondered if we could ask staff to respond to the public commenter's question about the cafe car and weekend service.
Sure. So, and I'll cover some of this in the 21 budget discussion, but I do want to comment more broadly on how we've approached the service level. So when we first went down to the 5 round trips, that was in response to the stay-at-home order. So it was to send the signal and be clear that we really did want to focus on essential travel. We had also already watched our ridership drop to less than 10% within a very short period of time. And so we wanted to space our service in a way that essential travel could still happen, but we could keep everybody safe. So we did that first change. And then when we came back up to the 8 round trips on weekdays, our goal there was to continue to have enough cars available so that we could run the 5-car consists. So right now we're running 7 consists total instead of 9. If you remember our regular service, we have to run 9 distinct consists, and some of those are shorter than 5 cars. So with our current service, we're trying to provide ample space for people to travel. We've also focused on our highest travel periods of the day. On the weekends, we've kept it at 5 round trips. Our weekend ridership is still quite low. The other thing that we are looking at is FY21. And I'll go through some of the details of the uncertainty as we go into FY21, but we want to be very cautious about the degree to which we add service. We were provided with guidance from the state, and this was given to all of the joint powers authorities in the state to not go above 60% of our base service as we increase service. And this is all with an eye towards 21. In terms of the cafe service, that is partly a health decision and partly a budget decision. So on the health side, Amtrak is working through some steps to provide protection for the employee that works in the cafe car. And we do have confidence we can do that, and we're going to work towards that. We've been providing emergency meal packs for people that are on the train who need, water or a snack. So that's available free of charge. And that's been the way that we've bridged that. We do have to look at 21 and whether we can do this financially within our budget. And we're watching there are a few services across the country that have introduced cafe service. Most have suspended it for now, but a few have introduced it. And we're going to see the degree to which passengers are comfortable using that service in places where it's been available. So that's a little bit of a wait and see, though that's a very short-term action, is to try to look through the analytics on that. That's where I had hoped to be today.
I think Rebecca's trying to get unmuted.
Sorry, but if you could just unmute me after each director, because I need to be able to call on the next director. So Director Lee is next, and anybody else want to get in the queue? Director Rayburn. Director Lee, it looks like you're still muted on your side. Still muted.
Maybe your volume is down.
Yeah, it looks like she's unmuted from here.
Mm-hmm. You're unmuted on Zoom. Maybe your mic is not working. Why don't I go to Director Rayburn, and Director Lee, if you have a headset or some other option, we can come back to you. So Director Rayburn, if he could be unmuted.
Thank you, Chair Salzman. And I really appreciate seeing that there will be a carryover of almost $9 million from the CARES Act into fiscal year 21. That's not enough to really run the railroad, but it's better than nothing. I didn't know what to expect there. The question I have is regarding masks and what the compliance is amongst our passengers, as well as any distribution that we're making to passengers that show up perhaps without a mask. And if we could, when the cafes reopen, I think a selection of fine masks would be very appropriate.
Yeah, so Amtrak system-wide is now requiring masks. And my understanding is that compliance has actually been quite good in our service area, with very few people riding that do not have masks. Our conductors who run the trains do have a handful of masks available, and they will make those available to passengers if needed.
Very good. That's great. And I just finished reading an Atlantic Monthly article published this week that debunks the idea that riding transit's a risky behavior. And it's based on a couple of surveys in Paris and the fact that Hong Kong, with tremendous transit ridership, has not suffered greatly from the pandemic.
Thank you. Let's go to Director Lee. If we can unmute her.
Is this working now?
Yes.
Okay, I have this gaming headset I use. Okay, so it sounds like, thank you, Chair Salzman, and thank you so much, Rob, and your team for this presentation, this update about what's been going on. It sounds like Director Rayburn has already asked a question I had around mask enforcement. So I have a few questions. I think they're all fairly straightforward questions, so I'm just going to ask them all, and then you can just sort of answer them. So the first question is around state guidance and how our ridership return plan and how our cleaning and how social distancing sort of requirements jive with Governor Newsom's phase reopening. This is, I know, something that BART has been thinking about in terms of what BART's overall capacity could be. The second question I have is around Amtrak guidelines, or if there are any kind of federal guidelines about what our Capital Corridor service can be doing. So if you can expand on that. The third thing is around county health orders, given I actually don't recall exactly how many counties Capital Corridor service goes through, but something upwards of 10, no, more than that, like a lot, 15 maybe. So I know that every county has different reopening plans, there's different requirements around essential travel versus mask requirements. So how is your service, especially for employees, how are you sort of managing the difference between all the county health orders? And for example, if one county says you can only use public transit for essential travel and another doesn't, how or do you enforce that? So anyway, that's my set of questions. Thank you.
All right, so I'll just take all, those are great questions. And to take the first one is the relationship to the state guidance on reopening. So we have had really good support from the state level. And in fact, I've been on calls every couple weeks. It was actually every week for a while with the Secretary of Transportation. And we were in close coordination with the state as we also pondered our changes. The state is very helpful in cases where there's differences in guidance across counties. And I'll give you a very specific example of something that happened is that early on, the counties had different requirements for wearing masks. And because Amtrak traveled between counties, they were not able to require that on the train because they were different places with different guidance. And so even though most people at the time were wearing masks. So the request we made to the state was to provide clarity about that so that the guidance was consistent. And so in cases where we have conflicting or differences in guidance across counties, we're going to look to the state to help us resolve some of that. And remember, too, this is not just Capital Corridor and it's San Joaquin service, it's the Pacific Surfliner service in Southern California. They all have the same challenges in the state. So we've had just great coordination from the state. At the federal level, you asked about guidance coming from Amtrak. So Amtrak as an organization has medical staff that they have supporting this effort. And so they have internally have some good resources to do that. And we've been in very routine contact with Amtrak on this issue over the past several months. The federal guidance has not dictated exactly what kind of service they're running, but certainly they're looking at all of the health trends as they're making decisions. There are lots of states like us, state-supported services that are out there, and what has happened is, as various states have had requirements at the gubernatorial level, they've made decisions about their service and modified that service in response to local conditions. So I think I've covered, if there's any clarification, anything I missed, okay, great, thank you.
Any other directors wish to comment or question? I see Director McPartland, but first let me see if there's anybody who hasn't gone yet. Okay, it looks like nobody else, so go ahead, Director McPartland.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate bringing up the issue of the different county health officers. And we're correct in assuming that they basically end up writing the rules for their jurisdiction. However, one of the things that we're trying to emphasize, or that I've tried to emphasize with BART staff, is that we need to end up making sure that we're in compliance with all those other organizations, but we also have to look at it from the perspective of we are our own special district. And if we wanted to have jurisdiction A versus jurisdiction B, one has masks and one does not. If we were to end up going with a mask rule, which I would recommend that we end up doing that we have kind of a public obligation to make sure that that is well communicated. That's number one. Number two is, I think that we should take a look at this from a leaning forward standpoint, and we may want to end up checking with legal on this. If we find ourselves in a position where the guidance is being reduced, however, as the guidelines have been reduced and we end up going on to phase 2 or phase 3, as our population continues to increase and it becomes more difficult to have social distancing, we may want to end up making sure that we have a mask rule instituted when other jurisdictions do not. And looking at it from the standpoint of, do we have the authority to do that? Ask legal. I would be willing to bet you dollars to donuts that yes, we do. And if we're taking a look at it from the perspective of epidemiology, don't forget that we basically have got a 70-foot, in the case of BART, 70-foot petri dish that everybody is piling into. In conjunction with that is that a lot of us are making masks available. I know that if I had a family of 5 and I wanted to make sure that everybody had a mask, I may end up going on to a BART train, and in 2.5 days, I've got a mask for everybody because I just pick one up every time I go through. Do we want to sell them? Do we want to end up meeting that need? How can we ramp up? Those are some logistical issues that we need to end up taking a look at. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other director comments or questions? If not, I don't have further questions because you've all had such great questions so far. But I do just want to conclude by thanking all of the staff, both at Capitol Corridor and Amtrak. I know the past few months have been extremely challenging, and the fact that employees have showed up every day to keep the railroad running for those essential workers who really need it, or people who need it for essential appointments. I've heard from some of our riders who are still riding, and they've expressed just how grateful they are and how important it is that we keep running. So just wanted to thank all of you for all of the great work you've done. And I know this next year is going to continue to be challenging. So just want to appreciate you, and we'll all continue to work together to get through this. So I think that concludes that item, and now we'll go on to the draft FY 2020-2021 CCJPA budget.
And we'll wait. The slides are going to come up, and I'll just comment that you're going to hear some interesting stuff at the end of the meeting. Priscilla did her team did a nice job with a survey, and we're going to hear a little bit about perceptions, and I think that'll be important as we move into the next several months. So you can go ahead into the next slide. So as we talk about FY21, I want to first walk through our typical process of business plan development and approval and how we're going to diverge in this year. And through February, we followed the normal process. So we developed the plan. We had our public outreach meetings. We had great feedback from the public, and then came back in February and approved the draft business plan. So we were business as usual through February, and then obviously in March, the world changed underneath us. So this is where we're diverging from a typical path. So I'll go line by line and just talk about this. So on March 31st, we typically receive from Amtrak a forecast for the next fiscal year, and this is required in our operating agreement with Amtrak. And remember, the fiscal year is the federal fiscal year, so that starts October 1st. To date, Amtrak has not provided that. They've not been able to do that. We got a very early draft just this week, but this is obviously a challenging time, so we are just beginning to do that. We normally submit our draft business plan, first draft business plan, to the state on April 1st. That was extended by a month, but we did submit the plan as adopted in February on May 1st. And then in a typical year on June 15th, we submit the final business plan to CalSTA. And that final plan includes the forecasts that are provided by Amtrak. So the forecasts that are provided at the end of March are incorporated into that final business plan, and they're submitted to the state. So we obviously haven't done that yet, given the uncertainty and the lack of information at this point. And then in July, we receive an approval from CalSTA, which is our budget. We expect this year that this will be a split approval, so the state will approve our administrative and marketing function, the Capital Corridor staff functions, but hold off on approval of the Amtrak operating budget. We have for that budget a start date of October 1st, so we have some time to work through that. We normally come back in September and approve the state allocation letter and also the Amtrak operating agreement, which is for the next fiscal year. This year, we may come back, and we expect to come back in September with a proposed modification to the business plan as we start to develop more details going into the next year. And then October 1st is our kickoff date, so that's the beginning of the FY21 fiscal year. Next slide. So this is just a reminder of what was in our draft business plan. In the center there, you can see that our total Amtrak contract was expected to be $27 million, which represents a slight decrease from FY20, due in part to the continued growth in our revenue from passengers. That's been a pretty typical trend over the past several years. Next slide. So I just want to talk about the uncertainty of 21 and where we are on these. These are the three factors that are going to drive our budget. The first is ridership and revenue. As we heard earlier in the presentation, we're running about, we're at about 12% of typical ridership, and that's been going up 10, 15% a week, but obviously still at a very low level. And we're doing our best here to think about next year. Amtrak nationally is expecting about a 40% ridership level. That's certainly what they're projecting, but I think we all know there's a lot of uncertainty around that. The second is the state budget issue, and I think we're all aware of it. At a macro level, the state budget shortfall is estimated at $54 billion for FY21. Our funding comes from the diesel sales tax. The price of diesel is way down, and the use of diesel is down, so those revenues are down. That doesn't necessarily drive our exact budget number, but at a macro level, we're expecting at a minimum that our resources from the state would be flat this year, if not a slight decline from last year. And then lastly, and this is a really important point, is the challenges with the way that we're allocated costs under the Amtrak system. It works reasonably well in a stable environment with stable service. In this case, given the magnitude of change that they're seeing at a national level, it's challenging for Amtrak to develop these forecasts in all this uncertainty. And like all large organizations, the ability to change the makeup of the organization within a short period of time is challenging. But we know that they're working on strategies to better align their costs with their ridership levels expected in the coming year. Next slide. So this slide, I want to talk just a little bit in detail about things that we're looking at in 21. So the left side here shows you the revenue that we use to pay expenses. A lot of our revenue comes from, in a typical year, comes from passengers, and that's the food and beverage revenue as well as ticket revenue. And the remainder is the state payment. On the expense side, you can see, and I've highlighted a couple things here. There are things that we can control and things that we have less control over. The things that are most directly charged to Capital Corridor and the things that we have control over are specifically bus service. So you can see there that we have $5 million in bus service. A lot of that's the Emeryville to San Francisco connection. We're looking carefully at our bus service levels. The other is stations. We think there's some ways. The costs that are shown there are primarily from the 5 stations that are staffed, and we're looking at opportunities in close coordination with Amtrak on how we address that. The rest of the costs are driven by service levels. So you would expect that as service levels go down, those are going to roughly go down in proportion, although not at the same pace as we would cut service. So we may cut service at a level that's higher than we would expect the costs to decline at the same time. So the next slide. On a positive note, we do have resources that you can use for FY21, and we talked already about the carryover from the CARES Act, federal funding, which we do not see in a typical year. Amtrak is also seeking and has a formal proposal to Congress. They're also seeking to provide additional support to state-supported services in 21, and we certainly do not know the willingness of Congress to provide that, but that is something that is out there. The state rail assistance dollars that we have had now for 3 years is available. That's a flexible fund source for us. We certainly would prefer to use it on capital projects and improve things, but that is a resource that's available. And lastly, the Capital Corridor reserves, and that includes revenue above budget and cost savings that we've used in the past several years to provide matching dollars on a number of our capital improvements. So with that, I am finished with the presentation, and we can open it up.
Thank you. First, we'll go to public comment, and I see Mike Barnbaum wishes to speak, so if you could unmute him.
Hello, good morning again. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to comment on this presentation. Rob said some things important, which I think needs some follow-up on, about the state budget. You talked about uncertainties, and you talked about within your own budget, the cost of throughway bus service. And I have a suggestion on that, which I'd like some feedback on if possible. So on the state budget, I watch closely because I'm here in Sacramento. Lawmakers did, in effect, pass a budget off to the governor on Monday by the constitutional deadline, but they assumed that there was going to be more federal funding in it from what is going to be called the HEROES Act, which is still yet to be acted on by the Senate and the President at this time. Only the House has passed it. So there's a lot of uncertainty about the HEROES Act. And one thing to keep in mind is that COVID-19 pushed the tax deadline from April 15th to July 15th. So there's also going to be an August revise of the state budget coming out, and there's a lot of uncertainty of that as that goes forward. On the cost-cutting measures that I want to suggest and need your feedback on, I really suggest eliminating the Emeryville-San Francisco throughway bus service and turning that responsibility over to Line F. Line F is an AC transit line that operates between UC Berkeley, Emeryville, and the Salesforce Center in San Francisco. And I think that the frequency of that service and the agreements that could be reached between the two parties might be more suitable to run service to San Francisco. And I hope that staff could have a staff-to-staff meeting between now and the September board meeting in Sacramento and report back in Sacramento how that went. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we have Director Ames, who today is a member of the public because she's an alternate, and we both have both members from the county here. So if you want to comment as a member of the public, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of the budget for the throughway bus service, because I actually applaud the last speaker, because looking for ways to figure out how to connect bus service to BART, I think is really key to our ridership for Capitol Corridor and BART. So the question is, does the throughway bus service budget have the connection that goes to the Centerville station in Fremont, or there's also a stop over by 680 and Mission Boulevard off, it's by a park and ride at a Caltrans park and ride in Fremont. And I just want to know what the service includes relative to Fremont, because I'm trying to, I would love to see Amtrak or Capitol Corridor bus systems connect to BART somehow. And either Union City or Fremont BART stations, because I think it's not very seamless right now. We've got these stops that are not real well coordinated with BART and these other mass transit systems like the Capitol Corridor station as well. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that wish to speak before we go to directors? It doesn't look like it. And since we had a couple of questions about our bus service, Rob, if you could respond to that, I'd appreciate that. And then I'll go to Director Spearing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the bus is a good question, and I think some of you are aware we've had a history of working with local transit partners to replace the throughway bus service with open door service. That means that you don't have to be on a train as part of your trip to ride that bus service, and we provide a payment to the partner to do that. And we have actively, and we've raised this at previous meetings, we've been actively working with AC Transit on trying to get AC Transit to provide that connection between Emeryville and San Francisco. That service has escalated rapidly in cost over the past several years and is not really sustainable. And so we want to look for opportunities to improve the connections to Emeryville for people that live there, but also provide support to our customers. So that's an active effort. We're also looking at ways to better coordinate with the other JPAs. So there are services that run from Santa Barbara up to our area, and we have a bus that we currently have suspended that does the same. And so we're making sure that we're coordinating closely and not duplicating service. Given the reality of budget situations, we need to partner as much as we can to provide these connecting services. And we're certainly at a staff level quite engaged in those activities, and we think there's a lot of opportunity out there to do that.
Okay, next we'll go to Director Spearing. If you could unmute him. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rob, I hope that you're considering a dedicated bus service out of Emeryville. You cannot rely on AC Transit on a scheduled route that's not really coordinated with the train. That part of our service is very well, it's used and it's expected, and it's a part of the system that, I think if you eliminate it, it's really going to hurt our ridership going down into the Bay Area. They'll look for alternatives. And so I'm hoping that through your negotiations with AC Transit, we're talking about a dedicated bus service that'll actually take the passengers when they get off the train. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and if we don't yet have we have talked to them about specifics, but we have not, we do not have a developed proposal. We will bring a developed proposal when we have one to the full board for consideration.
That sounds great. Other directors, Director Rayburn?
Thank you. Is the bus service from San Francisco to Emeryville, is the cost related to the Transbay Terminal rent increase, or is it reflecting just at-street service from San Francisco?
Yeah, that cost is not we're not currently stopping in the Salesforce Center. So if we were to move our stop into the Salesforce Center, we would incur additional charges. So those charges are almost exclusively for the contract operator, and is about 60% of our total bus operating costs at present.
Yet, of course, AC Transit does have an agreement, and their F-line does serve from the Salesforce Transit Center.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Do you have any other comments, Director Rayburn?
No, that's all.
Any other directors have comments or questions? Doesn't look like it. I would just ask, you know, it's clear that a lot is unclear right now, so that you come back, I think at each meeting, since we don't have meetings very frequently, with budget updates, both in terms of where the revenue is, where the expenses are, and, you know, these potential funding sources, what it's looking like. And I'd also ask that in between meetings, call on all of us to help. If you see potential funding sources and we can be of help, please use us as board members. I'm sure all of the directors here would be willing to reach out to their Congress members or legislators. So don't feel like it's all on the staff, and let us know how we can help when there are opportunities to ensure that our budget is stable and we're able to, you know, ramp up operations as there is demand for that.
Yeah, we will definitely come back on a routine basis, and we'll also continue what we've been doing over the last couple of months, which is provide a written update to the board on a routine basis, particularly when there's anything significant that's changed. We'll be sure to reach out as soon as possible to keep you informed.
Great. So we'll move next to item 5.3, authorizing the submittal of application for the FY20 CRISI program to support the Santa Clara Siding Project.
And I'm going to turn it over to Jim Allison, our planning director, who will take this agenda item.
Hi there, if everybody can hear me. This is Jim Allison, planning manager at Capitol Corridor. This item before you, I'd like to say it's not touched by COVID, but it is just a little bit. The project before you is a siding project down in Santa Clara. It's designed to alleviate delays that hit directly and indirectly our trains, also ACE trains, and to some extent Caltrain. It would be located just south of the track, right by Levi Stadium, so it also provides a safe harbor for event trains, which have been very successful associated when we used to have events at Levi Stadium. Hopefully that will return. In making this application to the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration, for the CRISI opportunity, it is due in 2 days. It is a work in progress right now, and I did want to call attention to some changes that have been made. They do not affect the resolution, but they do affect the numbers that are shown in the write-up. And I wanted to update you on those numbers. In the process of working through the application, we had to put the numbers in terms of year of expenditure dollars. So that is going to raise the CRISI ask, and as well, it raises the matching ask that we're going to use from the SRA funds that Rob mentioned before. So the new number, the new Chrissy ask number is $5,180,000, which is up from the 4.23. And then the matching number is $4,070,000, up from 3.39. So with those changes, that is roughly, the matching ratio is asking for 56% federal and 44% match. And the only COVID issue is that as you do ridership projections, obviously we have a very changed situation here. So the way we're handling this and making note of it to the FRA is that we're essentially pretending COVID never happened, and we're looking at the delta in what the project would deliver in terms of ridership and other operating benefits. So we have to make that assumption for that. But with this information here, happy to take any questions, and we will be submitting this probably tomorrow evening and on Friday morning, all the required elements. Thank you.
Chair Salzman.
So again, for the directors who are not unmuting during the presentation, you should. And again, if I could be unmuted right away, that would be really helpful. First, we're going to go to public comment if we have any. So I'll give folks a minute to raise their hand. And if anybody from the public is calling in, you can press *9. And if you are on the Zoom app, you can use the raise hand function. So first I'll go to Director O'Neill and then Director Rayburn.
Thank you very much. Obviously, down in Santa Clara County, we're very supportive of this project. As was mentioned by the Director of Planning, it is right next to Levi Stadium, and we are working very diligently and still having a very, very large development project right that'll go on both sides of the railroad tracks. So if we could really get this project moving, and that would be a tremendous help for the workers and the people who are going to be living in that proximity. So there's going to be thousands of new housing units, and it will become a regional entertainment district, even more than it already is. So I really look forward to seeing us move forward on this project. And thank you very much for the staff's effort on this.
Thank you. Director Rayburn?
Well, thank you, Teresa O'Neill, for your positive comments on this. I note that not only is this critical to reducing delays in the current operations, and I've been on that platform many times in the afternoon when the ACE trains are conflicting with our Capital Corridor trains and some freights moving through the area. But if we hope to implement our South Bay Connect project in the future, we will have many more trains coursing through the area. This is absolutely critical for the current and the future. I move support.
Thank you. And do we have a second? If anybody can raise their hand. Director Miller is seconding it. If the raising hand is an okay way to do a second, since most of us are muted. Do we have any more questions or comments before we go to the vote?
Second.
Great. Then we will go to the vote. Yes. Yes.
Taylor?
Aye.
Dr. Allard?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Dr. Frederick?
Aye.
Dr. Lee?
Yes.
Dr. McPartland?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Dr. Perales?
Aye.
Dr. Rayburn?
Yes.
Dr. Sparing?
Yes.
Dr. Roulette?
Yes.
Thank you. Carries unanimously.
Great. So we will move on to item 5.4 to authorize submittal of applications for SRA funding.
And Jim Allison, our Director of Planning, will cover this item. Jim, we can't hear you quite yet. Patty, is Jim unmuted?
Now I am. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Jim Allison again, Manager of Planning. This item, we've heard the term State Railroad Assistance before. We have got State Railroad Assistance for very a good smattering of projects before. It comes from the state, from the SB1 program. And about 5 years ago, or maybe it's 5 years ago, we had a prior allocation and commitments to those funds across a flexible range of projects. But we were rather specific, and we've funded that with our fencing program, our right-of-way trespassing focus, and also had some for projects. This time, with the SRA funds that we're being asked to apply for in July, by like July 15th, there's more uncertainty in the world. And as a result, we're proposing a categorization of different projects, and those are in your write-up. The categorization is for customer access, system safety, operational infrastructure enhancements, planning and project support, and finally operations funding. In those categories, we are intending to build flexibility to, as appropriate, identify projects that come up in any one of those categories. And for instance, in customer access, if we wanted to look at a bikeway improvement that we're matching funds with a local city, we might use SRA funds to partner with that city. If we wanted to continue with our right-of-way program, we would have the ability to put funds into our fencing program to clean up the right-of-way. As well, in operations funding, and it was mentioned by Rob, with the uncertainty, especially in next fiscal year, we would also have the flexibility to use those funds to support operations should we have a service funding gap. So this time around, we are asking or taking a much more flexible approach to spending these funds. They're approximately starting at $5.7 million a year. And in 2024-25, they go up to $6.3 million a year. The total is roughly $29.8 million in all told. And over the span of time, we would look to commit funds according to these categories. So I'm submitting this information for your understanding for adopting this, and adoption of the resolution will allow Capital Corridor staff to make those allocations. And as a commitment to that flexibility, the staff is representing that to the board, that we will give regular updates at board meetings on the expenditures of those funds. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Thank you.
What's there not to like about Linton? Man.
So can John McPartland's phone be, or line be muted, please? Sounds like he has background noise. And then are there any public comments? I'll give folks a minute to press *9 if they'd like to comment.
I don't see any comments.
Okay, and then we'll go to director comments or questions. And if we don't have any comments or questions, would somebody like to make a motion?
I move, this is Saylor, I move approval.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. I would actually ask, just sorry, Director Rayburn, since you've been unmuted the whole time, is there somebody else who would like to second who just couldn't speak? Because I saw a couple other people make motions.
Yeah, I don't have to be the seconder, but I would really like the ability to mute and unmute my own microphone. It's I mean, I can control it. I'm really good at it. Like, I promise not to abuse it. Thanks.
We will try to figure it out for next time. I know it's a problem because it's kind of like you either leave everybody with the ability, including the public, or nobody has the ability, is my understanding by how we have the setup of Zoom. At least that's how it is for Bart. I know some other agencies seem to have another setup, so we can look into it. I'm going to talk after the meeting to see if at least a couple people could be given the opportunity to be the host so we can have a few people dealing with the unmuting. But again, I think actually the easiest way is for everybody to stay muted and to physically raise your hand or raise your hand in the Zoom app so everybody has the same opportunity.
That'd be great. Yeah, just the consistency, I guess, is all would be great. Thank
I
you.
agree. That is the best way to do it because I don't want the same people having the opportunity to move all the items when other people would like to. So we have a motion and a second. If we could go to the vote. Yes.
You may have to take him out of that position, but you're not going to.
And if you could mute Director McPartland's line, it sounds like he's away from the meeting. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm muting and unmuting and calling roll at the same time.
Yeah.
Director Saylor?
Aye.
Thank you. Director Allard?
Yes.
Director Duffy?
Yes.
Director Frerick?
Aye.
Director Lee?
Yes.
Director McPartland? Director Miller?
Aye.
Director O'Neill?
Yes.
Director Perales?
Yes, and while I'm voting, I'll just say that we have there's a Zoom webinar format, which hopefully you can use next time. That's the proper format to allow for the greater flexibility you're looking for.
Thank you. Director Rayburn?
Aye.
Director Sperry?
Yes.
Director Roulette?
Aye.
Thank you. Carries unanimously.
Thanks. So we will now go on to item 5.5, legislative matters and the governors may revise. Rob, it looks like you're trying to talk, but we're not hearing you. Still not hearing you.
Okay, so we should be on again. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So for legislative matters, the packet includes an update on a number. There's a lot in there today. I want to focus on a couple of items. The first is we did submit comments on the metrics and standards notice of proposed rulemaking that came out recently. And the big point we made in that comment is we want to make sure that we're able to maintain our performance incentive approach with Union Pacific, which actually is above what's been proposed in this rulemaking. The second is I want to go back and talk about the INVEST Act again, which shows a really, and you can go to the next slide, Patty, really offers a positive sign. And again, getting through the current challenges that we have, an unprecedented level of support for rail, including $60 billion over a 5-year period authorized in the first draft from the House. And in fact, this is under markup today. It includes a new PRIME program, which is a grant program targeted at passenger rail, $19 billion, and then a $7 billion authorization for CRISI, which we have a project that we just discussed being applied for today. Both of those would allow us to accelerate a lot of what we're hoping to do in our vision plan. And we're hopeful that will make it through Congress. There's also a grade separation program authorization at $2.5 billion, and then an increase in Amtrak funding. There's some operating requirements in there that we have some concerns about that we're working through. But overall, this is just a great lift for all of us in the business. It shows the support in Washington for intercity passenger rail, and we're very hopeful. I'll be happy to take questions on any of the other items that are in the packet.
Thank you. First, do we have any public comments? Does not look like it, so we will go to directors. Any questions or comments? Doesn't look like it. And do we need a motion on this item?
No, we have that listed as an action item in case we needed to take action, but we do not have any requested action items for this item.
Great, then we can move on to the next item, which is item 5.6, South Bay Connect update.
And Shirley Chen, our senior planner, is going to take this agenda item.
And we have slides for this, Patty. Hello, everyone. This is Shirley Chen, senior planner, and I'm the project manager for the South Bay Connect project. So before I go into the update, I just want to give everybody a quick recap of the project thus far. We received the TIRSIP award in late 2018 to shift service to the coast subdivision and reduce travel time between Oakland and San Jose. Another goal of the project is to separate passenger and freight rail services in the southern East Bay to improve operation efficiencies for both uses of the rail, and also to improve connectivity to underserved markets on the SF Peninsula by building an intermodal station on the Dumbarton corridor. So that was the TIRSIP application that was awarded. And thus far, between 2018 and 2019, we validated the project assumptions made in the TIRSIP application and better defined the high-level scope through an initial project definition report that was completed at the end of 2019. So next slide, please. At the end of the project definition phase, the project team decided to break out the State Route 84 bus facility component from the core rail project so that it can go through its own timeline of planning, design, and environmental, because its context of right-of-way ownership and stakeholders is different than that of the core project. The State Route 84 is a Caltrans right-of-way, so we will be working with Caltrans District 4, as well as MTC and AC Transit staff on the planning, design, and environmental of the State Route 84 bus facility. Today's update on environmental review process only applies to the core rail component of the project, which is on described on the left side of the screen. And it includes the shift of service, rail improvements on both Niles and Oakland subdivisions, as well as on the coast subdivision, and new stations on the coast subdivision. Next slide, please. The estimated environmental review phase is outlined as shown on the slide. The project will kick off the CEQA process by issuing a notice to proceed at the end of June or early July, followed by a 45-day public scoping period. Between fall 2020 and spring of 2021, the project team will prepare a draft EIR, and the public review period for that document will be in the summer of 2021. By the end of that year, 2021, the project team anticipates having a final EIR that will be reviewed and certified by the CCJPA board. Next slide, please. Public outreach and engagement is a core part of the environmental review process, and the project team has given extra thought to how to engage the public during a lingering health crisis. We will be leveraging more online resources, and we anticipate equal, if not greater, amount of public engagement as a result. For ongoing stakeholder and agency coordination, we are compiling a large database of property owners and stakeholders, and we plan to do presentations as well as working group meetings to distribute information and gather input. We will be utilizing a wide range of tools and tactics to engage the public, including a project website, email blasts, public meetings, mostly virtual, and then in person as needed and allowed. We will be leveraging existing Capital Quarter social media channels, and we will be producing various collateral materials that can be used electronically and physically. That's all for the project update today, and I look forward to hearing any comments or questions.
Thank you. First, we'll go to public comments. We have one public comment from Mike Barnbaum.
Yes, good morning again. On this project, I want to make a couple of comments. This is a huge project, in terms of engaging Capital Corridor and Union Pacific in order to authorize the greater than 7 normal round trips currently allowed to San Jose. I want to state that in case people haven't known, and especially to our directors in Yolo, Sacramento, and Placer counties, if you've gotten comments that the lack of service to San Jose has discouraged some of your constituents in using the Capital Corridor, well, maybe there's a little bit of ray of sunshine I could give in this item, and so timely today, that just this last Saturday, the parent company of the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority, the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit District, finally has put its footprint in North San Jose and Santa Clara County. I'm going to take an opportunity this Saturday to travel Capital Corridor to the Coliseum and walk over the ramp to the green and orange line and take a ride to the Great Mall in Milpitas and check out the new stations at Milpitas and Berryessa, especially in wake that BART is now more frequently going to Santa Clara County than they ever have before. So I think this is also a timely item, a great marketing opportunity, and it's something that we can really promote now while we all work on getting Oakland San Jose Connect a reality in a timely fashion. So those are my comments I wanted to give to you on this item, and I yield the rest of my time back to my A's fan, Chair Saltzman. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's so sad that we have no baseball games, so I won't get to see you there. So next we have a public comment by Director Liz Ames.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I'm very concerned about this South Bay Connect project because I contacted the Altamont Corridor Express, executive director, and I noticed that in the initial project definition report that ACE was not mentioned as a stakeholder. And I then talked to them briefly about having ACE connect to this intermodal Ardenwood station, which is in Fremont, next to Highway 84. So I think it's really important to have a station, especially now that Dunbarton Rail keeps getting deferred. We don't know what's going to happen there. So I would encourage the staff to update that definition document to include ACE as a potential stakeholder in the station, possibly sharing that with Capital Corridor. Because as you know, we get a lot of traffic here through the Tri-Cities, which is Fremont, Newark, and Union City. It passes through Highway 84 and Niles Canyon, and then goes over to the high-wage jobs over in the peninsula. And the other thing I'm discouraged about is how do we connect BART to this train station? I don't see any kind of nexus other than the Dunbarton Rail project, which possibly we need somebody to intervene. Maybe it's Capital Corridor can help facilitate the train operations to get that system going from Redwood City over to Union City, BART, potentially. So I'm also discouraged to see possibly that Dunbarton Rail might stop at Ardenwood, and then how is it going to get to BART? So I feel like the Southeast Bay there is left out of the strategic planning. And I know we have a connection to BART and the train system in Oakland, but we really need to have it over here by the Highway 84 Union City Fremont station area, because we get a lot of pass-through traffic. So I don't want to see us going ahead with a June notice to proceed when we also don't have a study that's done to look at all of that coordination with all the different rail systems. And that study, I believe staff can talk about that. It's still underway. And the study to look at the nexus of all of these train connections in my area, which is the Fremont area at large at Newark, Union City, South Hayward. The study is supposed to get done at the end of this year, and I'd like to get an update on that as well. But thank you very much for the update.
Thank you. Now we'll go to director comments and questions. Are there any comments or questions? I don't see anyone physically or virtually raising their hand. And this is an informational item, so we don't need a vote. So with that, we can move on to the next item, item 5.7, which is the capital projects update.
So for this item, we've just heard about one of our significant projects, so I will just note that in your packet is a table with all of our capital projects. I will be happy to take any questions from anyone on any of the current projects.
Can you remind us what page that's on?
That is on page 24 in your packet.
I'll give people 30 seconds to look at that list to see if anybody has questions on any of the projects.
Director Miller has waved his hand. No? Okay, never mind.
Okay, and then I see Director Lee has her hand up.
Thanks, Chair. This is not any, not a question about any specific project, but just generally, again, I'm just got my BART board brain on a little bit. I know that for BART, there's been an opportunity to advance capital projects. I know you talked at the start of this meeting that you see that there's opportunities for new federal funds to come in around different capital projects. So can you just give some highlights of what possibly could be accelerated or what is currently being accelerated because of changes to service and the pandemic right now?
So most of our projects are on the infrastructure are conducted by Union Pacific. So we are currently doing a couple of signal projects. I believe it was approved at the last board meeting. At one near Emeryville and another one near Davis, and so those are moving quickly. I would say the service levels for us are not driving the change that you might see at BART because there's freight service throughout the day too, so there isn't necessarily the extended period. We have had, I'd say, more progress on the equipment side because we've had more equipment parked at the Oakland maintenance facility. Our service has grown so rapidly over the last number of years that we were using our equipment very heavily and we were falling behind. And so we've been able to catch up on some of that maintenance activity. So that's where you're going to see more of the change. So when we get back out there, we're going to see our on-time performance pick up a little bit because of that improvement. But we're working closely with Union Pacific to move on some of those really exciting projects that we think will also make a big difference with the reliability.
Great, thank you. Other director comments or questions? Seeing none, we can move on to item 5.8, which is the managing director's report.
All right, so we have slides for this section. If you can go to the first slide, which is slide 31. Actually, can you go back one slide? Apologies. So in the report today, I'm going to first just go through this. These are pretty standard slides on performance, and I'll go quickly because we've covered a lot of that already. I want to highlight a couple of projects that we've completed and are working on, and then give an update on right-of-way incidents, and then wrap up with a really interesting survey that we conducted of our passengers over the past couple weeks. Next slide. So this is a standard report that we provide. This goes through April, and through April, our ridership is 19% below plan, and our revenue is 16% below plan. On-time performance has improved in recent months, but for the year is still short of the 90% goal that we have. And then lastly, our system operating ratio, which hit 60% for the first time last year, is now at 50% for the fiscal year. Next slide. So this is a painful graphic to see here, but our ridership is obviously way down in April and May. But we have already seen a ticking back up in the last several weeks. Next slide. I'm sorry, that was revenue. This is ridership, which you can see compared to last year by month, with the drop starting in March and continuing into May. Next slide. And here you can see on-time performance, which we saw start to improve. Actually, if you go back even to October, we were seeing a general improvement. We had a little bit of a drop in February, but overall we were making some good positive movement on-time performance, and then I saw a big jump in April and May in a positive direction. Next slide. So I want to highlight a couple of projects, and these have come before the board in recent months. The first is Richmond lighting project. So next time you're at Richmond in the evening, you will see LED energy efficient lights. We're doing the same at Martinez, but we're all done at Richmond. Next slide. We've heard this already, the door operator replacement project. So we were able to do this on 14 cars. And this is one of these nagging on-time performance issues where you'd lose a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes on a door at a station. Individually, that may not seem like a big delay, but then you get down to single track territory and suddenly you've missed your connections down there, and it makes for a big delay. So we're really hopeful this is going to help us quite a bit. Next slide. The Wi-Fi installation, which our passengers love, as you know, we did have a hold on that for a couple of months due to COVID, but that started up again June 1st. Reports from the field are that this is moving along quite quickly. And again, this will be one of those things that we will be helped by the number of cars that are parked in the maintenance facility. When the first consist is available, we'll announce it to customers and tell them where this is live so that they can note the difference. Next slide. And then I wanted to highlight here the intermodal station access study that's in your packet. Aaron Rubin, who is one of our 2 Climate Corps interns this year, put this together, and it's a really impressive piece of work. And you know, we believe very much in attracting people into our field, and we've been a sponsor of this program for a number of years. And Shirley Chen was a Climate Corps fellow. And this is a product of Aaron's work here, and you'll see it details a number of potential improvements at stations that can improve access. And so we're looking forward to partnering with communities on some of these ideas that he's laid out for us. Next slide. And then I wanted to give an update on trespasser fatalities. Unfortunately, I have an update to this, which is we did have another fatality this week. And so for 2020, we have exceeded our total for 2019. We made a lot of progress with our right-of-way program, fencing, right-of-way cleanup that has been effective in reducing the numbers, but we're going to keep working hard on doing our best here to keep these numbers down. Before I turn it over to Priscilla for the passenger survey, I just want to pause and see if anybody has any questions on any of the things I've talked about so far.
I can't see people raising hands because the presentation is up. So if you want to raise your hand, please do that virtually, or now I can see you. So now you can just raise your hand. So Director Rayburn?
Thank you. Regarding the trespassing incidents, it looks like they're outside of the urban core areas. And are you seeing, is this areas that are unfenced and you're unable to block the access and maybe nearby encampments? What do you see driving this, Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to have Leo Sanchez take that question.
Thank you.
This is Leo speaking. Director Rayburn, so previously this has been primarily on some of the urban areas, but yeah, we have seen a couple of these pop up in miscellaneous areas. We're working on compiling a plan to evaluate what areas need fencing, because as you mentioned, there are a couple of areas where fencing needs to be repaired, and then there's a couple areas where fencing, new fencing needs to be placed in order to hopefully try to mitigate some of the issues that we've seen.
Thank you.
Other directors have comments or questions? Okay, it doesn't look like it. I didn't see any public comment. I just wanted to say lots of exciting progress, and I'm really excited to see the Wi-Fi upgraded. It's kind of nice that, you know, at a lot of agencies, these things are moving forward, and then when riders come back, they're going to be impressed by improvements. So it's good to have some exciting things for them to come back to. And does that complete items 5, 9, and 10 as well, or is there anything additional on that?
We're gonna take just Priscilla's gonna keep going on the managing director's report for with this survey. So that's a part of the managing director's report. So if we can put the slides back up. And then unmute Priscilla, please. And go to the next slide. Thank you. And we need to hear Priscilla as the next step here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay. Hi, this is Priscilla Kalugin, the Marketing Communications Officer for Capital Corridor. And in late May, we conducted a rider survey of our passengers to sort of gauge their interest in their return to Capital Corridor and how the shelter in place had affected them, and just to sort of get an idea of what lay ahead for us, because so many things have been unknown about this situation that we're in right now with the pandemic. Next slide, please. We did this to sort of learn more about the customer travel patterns during shelter in place, and also to determine what their willingness to travel would be once it lifted, because we figured there'd be a lot of differences and a lot to learn about that. We sent the survey out to our subscribers via email, as well as posted on our social media channels. Next slide, please. So one of the questions we asked was, prior to the shelter-in-place orders, how often did you ride the train? And you can see here that almost 40% of our riders were riding 4 to 7 days per week, and another 18% rode 1 to 3 days per week. Next slide. And we then asked them, have you continued riding Capital Corridor for Central Travel? And during shelter-in-place, about 19% of our respondents said that they continued riding for essential travel, which included traveling to work as well as to medical appointments. Next slide, please. We then asked, knowing that many of our riders are likely working from home already, we asked them how long they expected to continue working from home after the orders had been lifted. And almost 29% said that they'd be returning regularly, which is great. But the other answers we noticed were more spread out, and quite a large chunk of nearly 31% were simply just not sure. Next slide. We asked how frequently they predicted they'd ride when they came back. Prior to shelter in place, as I mentioned earlier, about 39% said that they rode 4 to 7 days per week. But now we can see here that only 28% plan to be back that frequently. More riders will be choosing to ride less frequently, as expected, with more than 20% still falling into the not sure and not planning to ride for a while categories. Next slide, please. Here we see how people will be traveling if they decide not to ride the train. And the majority of them do plan to take their personal vehicles, We did find that a number of them said that they had other options, so we broke that out as well for you to check out there in terms of the choices that they'd be making. Next slide, please. And of course, travelers everywhere have apprehensions about returning to transit. So we asked our riders what types of precautions they'd want to see on our service that would make them more comfortable. Obviously, cleaning and masks, distancing were some of the most suggested options. Next slide, please. This is an interesting question that we asked. It was on a scale of 1 to 5, how has the pandemic affected you financially? And about 55% of them have not been heavily affected, but almost 45% have indicated that there's been at least a moderate to high impact to them financially due to the COVID-19 effects. Next slide, please. And finally, we did ask them to provide one word to describe how they felt about returning to ride. And we just want to get an idea of their overall outlook. And as you can see, many of them are excited and happy, but certainly some are feeling anxious and nervous and cautious, as I think we all are. But I think we were very pleased to see that many of our riders were excited and happy, and that some felt safe to return to the train. That concludes the survey results report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
And that covers the full managing director's report. We'll wrap up by saying we'll focus on the excited word on that slide and appreciate all of Priscilla's work and her team in pulling that together. I'll be happy to take any questions on that item.
So we'll go to public comment. Mike Barnbaum.
Yes. So Chair Saltzman, I heard that you're probably taking all of this through item 10 as one public comment. So I'll try to address everything that I had on my mind for that. I want to thank Priscilla for the very comprehensive survey presentation. And to comment on that, I just wanted to say, I think that how often a person might ride the Capitol Corridor might depend on seasonal changes happening. Like I know, for example, if there was no pandemic, I had 5 round trips planned between near the end of March to about May 10th, and another 5 round trips between May 22nd and July 4th, specifically to cheer on our team in green and gold. But obviously, even that isn't happening. They haven't even played after they broke up spring training in mid-March, and we still don't know what's going on with that. And so I would consider myself a frequent seasonal rider, and maybe there are months, for myself speaking only, that I don't ride at all. But then again, the last thing I wanted to comment was in your materials for marketing, I don't know if you saw the supplemental materials on page 175. Staff did an overview of the marketing activities month to month over the past year as I had interpreted it when I read it. And one comment I want to say, staff may have seen this in an email I sent, but the board may not have. I think going forward, we might need to change our marketing activities up just slightly. And the fact that we know there's an NFL team now in Las Vegas that used to be in our area. And so I think the focus needs to be put on the NFL team in Santa Clara for similar promotions and discounts, and then use FY21 to prepare additional marketing and promotional activities for Major League Soccer, as there will be both the San Jose Earthquakes and the Sacramento Republic FC in our corridor starting in February of 2022. And the stadiums are right near and within walking distance of 2 of our stations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any director comments or questions? Director Rayburn.
I just want to do a shout out for the station access study, and I was shocked when I opened that up and saw what is the equivalent of BART's station profile survey combined with our network gap study. Both of those are major, major, major projects, and Aaron Rodgers and Jim Allison and everybody that's worked on that did a tremendous job. It buttresses the importance of bicycling, for example. At Jack London, 31% of the riders show up on a bike. At an auto dependence station, Great America, 38% show up on bikes. And it's, as somebody that's driven by data and how we should allocate funds, when I see projects that need funding from the state to get access to stations like that, it goes to the top of the list. Or when I see that our bike lockers at, for example, at Great America are oversubscribed. Over 100% of the lockers are used every day. That's because multiple people can use them on a daily basis. It calls for additional investment, and that this board will need to continue to push to make sure that we're developing those great partnerships with the local communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other director comments or questions? Okay, then that concludes that item. Rob, did you have anything else under items 9 and 10? I know you've gone over some of them already.
Yeah, no, I've covered those. I'll be happy to take questions on any of those items, but I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Then we can move on to item 6, which is board director reports. So does anybody have anything to report? Does not look like it. It's been mentioned, but I just wanted to report that BART has opened its extension to Santa Clara County less than a week ago. So that is now an option, another way for people to get around. And I think we're going to have to watch closely how that impacts Capital Corridor ridership. Obviously not right now, but when ridership starts to come back, and how we might need to, look at our service based on that. Any other director reports? Then we will move on to general public comment.
Chair Saltzman, we do have one written public comment. Dear CCJPA board members, hello, my name is Eric Reese. My comment for future consideration would be for the board and staff to work with SJJPA, Monterey County, and Amtrak in acquiring the Union Pacific tracks from Salinas to Emeryville and the right-of-way for future Sacramento to Roseville third track. Acquiring the right-of-ways would consist of partnering with Amtrak to use Amtrak's eminent domain authority to acquire the tracks at fair market value and selling them back to the authority. Acquiring the right-of-ways from Union Pacific allows for numerous benefits, the first being the ability to expand Capital Corridor service beyond current slot limitations and into Salinas and Roseville. This allows the authority the flexibility to add service into these underserved areas without the headache of having to negotiate additional train slots. The second benefit is reduced host railroad fees through the ability to dispatch control train movements, ability to maintain the tracks, and fewer on-time performance incentive payments needed due to a reduction in host railroad mileage. Owning the right-of-ways allows the authority to tap into FRA funds that are exclusively reserved for Amtrak and publicly owned right-of-ways, thereby lowering track and signal maintenance costs and helping improve reliability. The third benefit is increased on-time performance through less freight train interference and the ability to complete capital projects on an incremental approach. Since the authority already funds many of the maintenance and capital projects for Union Pacific's benefit, owning the tracks would add minimal cost to the ongoing projects while allowing for a better operating environment. Working with Amtrak and the California legislature to conduct a right-of-way appraisal and obtaining funding for acquisition would allow for a more efficient and competitive capital corridor service for riders. Thank you for your time and consideration of this important proposal that can help reimagine the capital corridor experience.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak under general public comment? Seeing none, I will move to adjourn the meeting. We have our next meeting scheduled for September 16th. It was planned for Sacramento. I think it's pretty likely it will be another virtual meeting, but we'll communicate about how that's going to be set up, and I will work with staff to look into setting this up in the webinar setting so we can all have the ability to mute and unmute ourselves. So thank you all, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Let's just tell the web team that we'll drop the stream.